and welcome to another episode of If My Feet Could Talk. I'm your host, Owen, and I have another cracker of an episode for you. But first, let's catch up as I always do with what's going on with me. So, since my last podcast, I haven't raced, but my run streak continues. I'm on day 1257 today as we've recorded this. Also, yesterday I found out I've got a place in next year's London Marathon. Uh, so, London Marathon, for those that know me, um, will know that is a very special event for me. It's what started off my running journey. I went from couch to marathon back in 2010. Excuse me. And yeah, since then, I've gone on and done other things. And it took 9 ballot entries attempts later, 9 years later, before I ran it again in 2019. So I am absolutely pleased. Excuse me, I've got a bit of frog in my throat there. Absolutely pleased that I'm going again 3 years later to London to run it again. I can't wait. I just needed to work out how I'm going to run it. Last time, so the first time was my first marathon. Second time, I just wanted to go and enjoy it, all the experience, no race plan or nothing. That's what I wanted to do, which I did. So this time, do I set myself a goal? We shall see. And then the other thing is, hopefully, I'll be alongside to be able to do it because next year I go back to sea. I still plan on doing the podcast and still plan on running every day as best I can on dry land. But it may be some treadmill running involved on board ship. So we shall see. Yeah, back to sea next year. But hey ho, that's my job. But we'll move on to our next guest. We connected through the world of TikTok not so long ago. He followed me, and so I followed him back, and I've been watching him ever since. And I've got to know a little bit about this extraordinary runner. So, listeners and viewers, I give you Zachary Frieldley. And we're recording now. Welcome to the podcast, Zach. How are you doing and how is the family?
Family's well. I'm doing well. I just got back from a month-long road trip to many different places, and it's great to be back here in Albion, California, with my wife and dog, Cleo.
And whereabouts is Albion in California?
So if you know where San Francisco is, you basically go up the coast all the way about 3.5 hours, and I'm right there on the coast, kind of squished between the ocean and the redwood forest.
So you got a sort of nice sort of area. You got the coast and the forest areas. That's it's quite lucky to be in that where you got two different types of.
Yeah, it's super epic. The
So
only thing lacking here is altitude, which
well,
really kind of gets me sometimes.
yeah, I feel your pain on that. We're not massive on altitude over here in the UK. We do have some small mountains, but nothing compared to the rest around the world. But you do have a lovely stretch of coastal path around San Diego way. Not San Diego, San Francisco.
Yeah, we got some headland trails up, and it's quite far from San Francisco, so there's not a lot of people. It is a tourist destination, but like during the week, it's very common that I'll go on a trail and I won't see another person at all.
That's not always a bad thing, though, is it?
Right.
Sometimes, sometimes just being lost by yourself on the trails
It's my
is
favorite.
yeah, it's mentally relieving, which is great. Well, I'm glad your family's all well. What type of dog you got?
A 9 pound Chihuahua mini pincher.
Can you really class that as a dog?
She's got a big personality, man.
Small dog syndrome. Yeah, yeah. That's great. So for those who don't know you, Zach, can you just give us a bit of who you are, what you do, share a little info about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm a professional trail runner with On. I run with a blade, and my alter ego is the Trailblader. That's what I'm called when I'm on the trails racing. I also am an executive director of a nonprofit, Mendocino Movement Project, and our mission is basically to make the world more accessible for disabled people in the outdoors exclusively. We host events and connect people with the resources that they need to move their body. So that's pretty much what keeps me busy. Is those both go hand in hand. I feel like I wear both hats at the same time.
That's cool. So uh, that is it a charity that you head up there?
Yeah, it's a 501c3. Yeah, so here in the U.S., it's just like a nonprofit.
Yeah. So is that just sort of your area, or does that cover pretty much all the states?
It covers pretty much all the states. I do a lot of speaking engagements around the country. For it, I go to running clinics and mobility clinics for amputees all around. So it encompasses basically coast to coast.
That sounds cool, and I take it's for you're not just dealing with adults, you're dealing with children as well with that.
Oh yeah, but the ages range. I mean, I've hung out with kids like 3 and 4, and people in their 70s. So there really is no limit on who I work with. If I feel like basically if you're a human that wants to move their body, then that's basically my client.
That's amazing. So obviously, were you from Albion originally, or were you from some other part of the great states?
I was from another part, Kansas City, Missouri. So for people that don't geologically know where that is smack dab in the middle of the United States, right in the middle.
So that's where you were born
And
and brought up, I take it.
yeah, in a small town called Kearney, Missouri. It's probably like 30 or 45 minutes away from the big city, and it was a very small town, like farming community, and that's where I grew up.
And how old are you, Zach? Just to give a bit of
38.
38. So you're only a few years younger than me. So you would have been raised in a period of obviously the 80s and stuff like that, where disabled children wasn't free. The whole word of disability wasn't talked about much, and the support wasn't
Yeah.
there. That's going to be pretty crazy for you guys, obviously, especially your parents back then growing up.
Yeah, so my parents had me when they were 18 years old in 1984. And back then, there weren't a lot of opportunities for disabled folks. There wasn't a lot of resources. And basically, that word disabled wasn't used in my household or in my life until my 30s, because you wanted to distance yourself from that word and be quote unquote normal or able
Yeah.
body. So I competed with kids that were able bodied my whole life, basically, in wrestling and football and baseball. So you didn't really have any the word adaptive like athlete was definitely not in the vocabulary back then, and there was definitely not any athletes to look up to that were limb different or any of that stuff. So I felt like I was on an island, honestly. I didn't really know any other disabled people back then. I went to a hospital called the Shriners Hospital, which helps out children that may be missing limbs or blind or burn. So they help out kids, and I went there a lot. And I don't really have strong memories of seeing another disabled kid, but surely they were around. But I didn't have like a friend or a mentor or a person that I
And there
looked
was
up
no
to. It
social
was
media back then either, was there? So
yeah, Paralympics weren't really talked
no.
about back then. So there was really not any opportunity, which uh, is who made me who I am. But today, in like today's world, 38-year-old Zach gets to basically be what 10-year-old Zach needed all the time. So it's really easy for me to go through my life and through the world and be that person for others.
So it must have been tough for your parents back there, especially being young as well. Because you
Yeah,
were
you would have
born
never
you were
known.
born without a leg and some fingers. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, my parents, you would have never known that it was tough on them. Looking back in retrospective, seeing, how they raised me and all that stuff, they did a remarkable job because I never knew anything different. They never like told me, the world's gonna be tough or you're this way. If anything, they pushed me pretty hard, and did a lot for being 18 years old. I couldn't imagine being 18 in 1980s and have a child that isn't right off the bat, like you have to figure out some things that a lot of other parents don't. So they did a great job, and I think it really empowered me to be who I am today.
And you,
But that Go
sorry,
ahead.
you obviously you mentioned they were obviously 18 and they obviously didn't have a lot there. Have they spoken to you about it since as you got older? Have you chatted to them about what it was like?
A little bit, not a lot. I don't live near them,
Yeah.
and I don't see them very often, and we haven't really had like a deep conversation about it. I know they're proud of what I do and stuff, but yeah, I just want to go through the world and provide opportunities for disabled people in a way that I didn't necessarily have, um, just to make it more accessible.
I mean, you mentioned obviously you did sports. That answers my question about being a sporty kid. What was that? How did you find it yourself? I mean, for
Yeah,
obviously a normal child will have the normal. I say normal. That's the wrong word to use, but we use a child without obviously any major medical issues or anything like that would still have some difficulties maybe fitting in or being picked on the team because they're not as good as the others. But what was it like for you having those additional challenges?
I had to work pretty hard. It was a lot of pressure that was probably self-induced, because I talk about like people have baselines, and like maybe the average baseline is here, and I started out a little bit lower than that, so I have to work extremely hard just to get to where the playing field is level, and then you got those people that are working to get above that. So it was a lot of work all the time, and it was like kind of a grind for me, especially the sport that I did, wrestling. It's physically demanding. It's mentally, you have to be mentally tough, physically tough. And I think that was just sharpening who I am for today, so I can go through and do the things that I do now. And it was just like training even though back then I was training to maybe be a state champ or whatever, but I think in the big picture, I was training to be who I am right now.
And obviously, I was watching something about you earlier, which we'll talk about later. But you mentioned in this period when you were wrestling, you chose different goals to maybe what somebody else would have chose. You chose smaller
Yeah.
victories to aim for than the victories itself. I did that work for you? Did that
Yeah.
help?
My dad did that. So my dad basically told me like I didn't start off by like, hey, you want to get your hand raised like that. He basically broke these down into different categories, and each year we did something new or added something on. And the first year was basically don't get pinned. I was taking beatings left and right
Yeah,
and
yeah.
learning how to take a beating and basically don't get pinned. And then the next year it was don't get pinned and maybe have them score less than 10 points. And then year three, it was, don't get pinned, and score some of your own points. And eventually I started to win matches and, became probably like at my best, maybe like a little above a 500 wrestler where I was winning more than I was losing. And people started scouting me, especially in like junior high and high school, because I had a style, and my style was really hard to wrestle because I made people wrestle my game. So I had my own things that I did, and people started to scout me and figure out ways that they could beat me, and it was fun. It was around high school age is when I started to get what I call muscles. I started to realize that I had more upper body strength than these kids I was wrestling, and I would do extra push-ups at the end of practice. And I did push-ups so many times that like my coaches had to tell me to like chill out on those. I had like a daily limit of like 200 or something. And they're like, you can't do more than that.
So, did you have? Obviously, I'm not totally au fait with obviously the Greek style wrestling that you do in America. It's not really big over here in the UK. Is it a weight category type thing?
Yeah,
So,
it's
were
weight.
you weighing, even though you're obviously getting muscle and you're obviously getting bigger, but because you're lacking in a limb, normally you would obviously have two. Would that drop you in a lower weight, but obviously you were stronger?
Yeah, so I appeared probably by the average person to be bigger than the weight class that I was wrestling. So I was significantly had bigger arms and
And using that to
bigger
your advantage.
shoulders. Totally. I would like what they call muscle people. So
Yeah.
like it's not really technique ish. I just relied a lot on my strength, and I could get myself into like really compromising positions and still feel comfortable there. Which is, kind of different when you're wrestling somebody like that because you're not used to somebody putting themselves in that position, but also feeling comfortable in that position.
And obviously, when you got to the stage where you were actually doing quite well and you're winning and obviously possibly getting scouted and stuff like that, that must have made you feel pretty good about yourself.
Yeah, it was a long road of hard work and cool. I think that's kind of when I started to get really addicted to like progression and seeing like you like from year to year to year, you can see the how hard work pays off, and I think that's what really got me into being a hard worker, because you put in what you get, and it's really cool to see that like kind of go up the mountain.
And how long did you keep the wrestling up for?
Let's see, I wrestled from like second grade all the way to basically my senior year. I didn't compete my senior year. I just practiced. I really got into like powerlifting when I was a junior and senior, and I was like winning national championships at that. And um, with like powerlifting, you can't really cut weight and be strong. So I just didn't want to cut weight for wrestling, but I still went to practice. And my younger brother wrestled, so I coached him. I mean, he was a multiple time state champ in Missouri and went on to wrestle in the NCAA Division One and was like a cadet world champion, stuff like that.
Yeah. I
So
mean,
wrestling was a big part of my life for
yeah.
20 years at least.
I mean, it obviously must have been giving you some sort of release as well, because we all know kids can be absolute arseholes in school, and
Totally.
being different to them, you must have probably had your troubles as well in school. Or were you lucky not to be bullied or?
I don't have a lot of memory. I mean, I definitely got picked on. Um, Definitely, probably more so before eighth grade, because when I was in high school, I started to have that identity as an athlete, and I think I got a lot of respect for being an athlete. And I trained hard, and I was a wrestler. A lot of people don't mess with wrestlers, and I hung around some tough people. But I don't remember a lot getting bullied in high school. Couple instances here and there, maybe getting called peg leg, or I remember some people used to make fun of my hands. Sometimes at wrestling tournaments, people would say stuff to me. Um, but I think I just kind of blew that stuff off. I didn't really focus on it, until later in life when I had a chance to sit still and work with a shaman about, my life and go through some of these traumas and really kind of peeled back those layers of things that I held on to that I didn't consciously hold on to, but they
Yeah.
were still there, you know?
So, are you predominantly left-handed or right-handed? I know your right hand's the one missing fingers,
You know,
but
it's pretty wild. So I write with my left hand. I am definitely stronger in my left hand. But when it comes to sports, like I can throw a baseball, you wouldn't even know the difference. I can slam it in left and right-handed, catch left and right-handed. Um, I can bat left and right-handed. I golf right-handed. So there's different things that kind of go. You know, I know when I play catch with people, they're usually impressed that I can slam it in with both hands with pretty good accuracy.
that's 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 great how your body's adapted in one sense, obviously left-handed for the stuff,
Pretty
but
sure I was
allows you
born
still.
right-handed.
Yeah,
I was born right-handed for sure.
yeah,
Like that comes natural. But obviously, when I was younger, my hand was webbed together. I had a couple surgeries that took some of my hands and gave me more range of motion. I had like 2 or 3 surgeries. So at first, I didn't have a lot of mobility with my right hand. I remember playing T-ball. I would catch the ball with my left hand, put my glove underneath my armpit, grab the ball and throw it with my left hand. And then in 3rd grade, I had an operation that kind of gave me more ability to grab things. So that changed. And then I was able to use my hand a little bit different.
that's that's quite impressive, to be honest. And then obviously moving on. You obviously, what did you do after college? What what did you?
Well, I didn't go to college. I went right into the work world.
Yeah,
You know, it was just something that I didn't embark on and started working. And, you know, I still worked out a lot. I coached my brother in wrestling. Um, and then that's when I kind of got my first blade. I got my first running blade in the year 2007. And I think I was like 23 and really connected with that and started to try to make a Paralympic track team in sprinting.
so about 23, you got your first running blade. What was that like when you first put that on? Can
It
you
was
remember?
sick. Yeah, I remember it crystal clear. My dad was with me, and we went down to Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, which was like 5 hours from Kansas City. And I didn't go there to get a blade. I went there because I had some issues with a prosthetic, and this I was just having some hard time up in Kansas City, and this company was pretty big, and they said, "Hey, come down to Oklahoma and work with one of our other people." So they did it on a weekend, and I was there to tune up my walking stuff. And while I was there, it was like a Saturday. He's like, "Hey, if you come back tomorrow, we can hook you up with a blade and see what you think." You know, it does take a lot of time to adapt and get use of it, so don't be frustrated. And I remember the guy was setting me up for like, "This is going to take you weeks and weeks to figure out." And he hooked it up. I figured it out in like 5 minutes and was flying down this hallway, you know, and it was like huge to be able to move like that. You only saw these things on like TV, and
Yeah,
at
because
the time,
you haven't got anything to compare with. It's not like you had two legs
yeah,
originally.
it was insane. I mean,
Yeah,
it was like somebody hooked up a turbo to my body. It just said go, and I went, you know, and that was what really started my quote unquote running journey, because I did run before that, but it was for like wrestling, you know, like
yeah.
conditioning, and it wasn't like the love of running or speed. Um, so that kind of really started like, oh, I can run now. What can I do with it? So I set my sights on making Paralympics in 2008, which was Beijing, and then London. And none of that stuff ever panned out. I went to several high level track meets and crashed and burned, wasn't training right, had a chip on my shoulder, wanted to prove stuff to the world, and it just wasn't the right formula for my
What events were
success.
you trying to get into?
I dabbled in like the 100, 200 long jump. Um, I might have done like 400, but I didn't really like that. I didn't really love any of it, to be honest. I just wanted to make a team and be like, yo, I'm a badass or whatever. But It never happened.
Did you start following many Paralympians back then to see what they were doing, how they were?
Yeah, back then it wasn't like there wasn't a lot of high profile athletes like that. I mean, they were starting to happen, but they weren't necessarily like dominant. There's one I remember. He might have started to make a name for himself. I mean, there's Oscar Pistorius, obviously,
Yeah,
but
he's
he was
now
a
known
below
for
knee.
wrong reasons.
Totally. He was below the knee,
Yeah,
which is different than me. I'm an above the knee, and we have our own class, and we compete against other above the
yeah,
knees. And at the time, it was 2012, and a dude from Great Britain, Richard Whitehead, he's a double AK.
yeah.
He started to be pretty dominant, and he was winning like the 200. I think he had like the marathon record. I'm actually friends with him on social, and we've exchanged some stuff back and forth. But he was one of the first ones that was like Michael Jordanish.
Yeah, I mean, he's still. I think pretty sure he did this Olympics as well, the recent one in Tokyo. Yeah, he did. Yeah, so he's still just about competing. He's
He's
he's now
he's
towards.
44,
Yeah, he's now towards what we would perceive at the end of his career. But
unless he
I
wants to jump in some trail running. We'll
well,
take him.
I think he should. Same with Johnny Peacock as well,
Oh
who
yeah, Johnny Peacock. Yeah,
he dominate. He for us, and I think the 2012 Olympics, especially the Paralympics. I think
that was
from
a big
there,
one.
I think we hosted such a good Paralympics.
Yeah,
Really did push, the Paralympians forward into so much. I mean, I love watching both Olympics. I love watching the Olympics and the Paralympics. I just love all the sports that goes around them, and just seeing all the different types of athletes that there are and what they can
yeah.
achieve, because it's so inspiring. And I think 2012 really put them on the map that year.
I think you're right. I think that's when the tide started to change, and it became like people could make a career out of this. Sponsors were getting bigger. The awareness was getting bigger. I agree. I mean, that was about 10 years ago. So I think we've made a lot of changes in the world as it comes to adaptive athletes and like Paralympians.
Yeah, I mean, even countries which haven't got the greatest track record with disabilities are now putting athletes into the Paralympics.
Yeah,
And they're now being recognised. That their little voices that they've had, which weren't being heard, are now being heard. Which is,
it's cool. I mean, I'm biased, but I think
yeah,
it's more impressive that a person can run 100 meters quick with carbon limbs than somebody with two limbs. You know what I mean?
yeah,
That's just
yeah.
me.
I think the hard work that goes into the the events that these people run, whether it's with a blade or whether it's swimming without any limbs,
Yeah,
they still got to put the work in. It
yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
matter if a blade may give them a slightly different running technique, and or some people say advantage, but it's not really, as Oscar Pistorius attempted in the Able Olympics one year. You know, it's a different world, and it requires the same dedication though, if not a
yeah.
little bit more.
I think it requires more because there's a lot of things that you have to obtain that another athlete doesn't have to attain. You have to have like a good relationship with the person that makes your prosthetic. You got
Yeah,
to have somewhat of a privilege to get the stuff in the first place. It's not a level playing field, as like another runner maybe just goes and gets a pair of shoes and maybe pays a running coach a couple $100. There's a lot of behind the scenes hustling that goes down for a person to be an athlete with, especially with a blade. I mean, there's many other types of disabilities out there, but from my experience running with blade, you got to like get an organization to give you a grant to get a blade, and then you got to get a processes to make you something that's comfortable and that works. And not everybody has the same skill set to make that. So then you got to possibly travel across the country. There's so much stuff that goes into just being able to train, um, that a lot of people don't see behind the scenes.
yeah. I mean, the science behind it as well. It's much like,
Yeah,
I would say, a cyclist. You know, yes, you could train the athlete, but if the bike's not aerodynamically, you're going to lose
totally.
those margins compared to
Yeah,
somebody else with a better bike. So if your blade
totally,
isn't as good as somebody else's, you can train as much as you want, but if they've trained as much
totally,
as you and have that advantage of a better blade, they're going to win.
totally. And it honestly, it's the luck of the draw when it comes to getting these prosthetics made. I mean, I've been in this world for a long time, my whole life, so I have a lot of experience knowing the ins and outs of what a prosthetic should feel like and what it shouldn't feel like. But somebody who's just into this new may not know you know what's going on. So
Yeah,
I travel from California to Chicago to get my prosthetics done.
that's mega.
Um,
How
and
far
before
is that
then, it was
roughly?
even
How far?
uh, 2,500 miles.
Yeah, so
Um, I mean, I
it's a,
stay there in a hotel, and
it's a fair few
uh,
hours, isn't it?
it's a lot of money. I mean, my leg all in $50,000, not to mention the time and energy it takes to get it, and
Yeah.
then staying in hotels and flights, maintenance. Not everybody has access to that either, so it's
No,
it's a lot of luck, to be honest.
it's even with our type of healthcare system over here, for specialist equipment like that, that's still
Yeah,
not free. You know,
totally.
it still costs a lot of money for our Paralympics teams to get the blades, to get the adapted bits of equipment for whatever sport that they do. So, excuse me. Yeah, I mean, that's $50,000. That's mega, isn't it? Absolutely mega.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So, moving on, you started running. When did you actually properly find the love for running, as we know running nowadays?
Yeah, so I left Kansas City when I turned 30 and sold everything I had, gave it away. Lived in Philadelphia for a year, was a nanny to two girls, and then after the school year, I found my way in California and worked up in the mountains of Northern California and did that for a season, and then found my way to where I'm at now and kind of started a life here and settled in. Did that for like 2 years. And then right around 2017, I started working with this shaman. His name's Fred Mittauer, and we did a lot of transformational body work on me and went through a lot of traumas and did just a lot of rearranging of who I am and what my purpose is and what I find joy in. And after doing a lot of that work, and I still do the work to this day, I'm actually probably going to see him in the next 2 days.
Hello,
I can.
there you go.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. You're back. Yeah.
Where'd you lose me at?
You were talking to your shaman about obviously
Yeah.
transformations and stuff,
Yeah.
and
So we just
traumas.
started to do a lot of work about things, and I started to find new purpose and new meaning to life, and started to just be comfortable with who I am. And at the same time, I'm still athletic, still had blades, and I ended up breaking a lot of running, or I broke a lot of walking stuff, and I only had a blade, and I was just running on beaches and trails around where I live, and I really, really liked it a lot. I was not running for a medal or to make a team. It was just like, wow, this is super awesome. And I kept following that feeling, and ended up starting a nonprofit. Went to India for like a month and learned meditation and just learned a lot about living and how to live a different life. And through that, I running was like right there, and my running kept increasing, and somehow found my way to Born to Run ultra marathons in Central California. Met my friend Luis Escobar, and did my first trail race at his event, and then the world totally opened up in a way that had never been for me. I started looking at national parks and different trails, and was like, wow, I can go here, I can go there, and started doing it a lot. And my wife actually encouraged me to get a running coach, and I had connections with the USA paratriathlon team, and got a coach that actually coaches adaptive athletes, and she's the Team USA coach for paratriathlon. And we started working together about 2 years ago, and got super structured in it, and really thrive in a structured environment and love it. Started doing trail races, big trail races, and just started seeing the need for these events for adaptive athletes, and doors kept opening and I kept walking through them, and here I am today, sponsored trail athlete with On.
So, when was your first actual big event?
After I did 2019 was Born to Run 10 mile, then we kind of hit COVID, but I started training really hard during COVID and running lots and lots. And right around April 2021, I did Zion 50K. And then right after that, I did another Oregon 20 miler through the Sisters Mountains. Then I did Lake Sonoma. I did a Spartan Trail. I did a bunch of stuff in 21, just like bing, bang, boom. And right around this time last year was when I started networking for UTMB and set my sights on UTMB, and got in like January of 22. And that has been my focus really for the last year, because it's big. It's a big deal. Big mountains, big trails, big event. And, I wanted to really represent the disabled adaptive athletes in that event, because it doesn't historically include us. There have been other athletes that have ran it, kind of under the radar. My buddy Adam Poff, who's an above knee badass dude, he runs like sub 19, sub 1800 milers as an AK, which is insane. He's on the USA paratriathlon team. Really quiet guy, but he ran CCC, made it 25 miles before he got removed from the course. But it went like unnoticed, and that really like bothered me. That to me was like one of the biggest athletic feats I've ever seen somebody do, and nobody knew about it.
Yeah.
So that's when I started like, I'm going to go do this damn thing and see what happens and be loud about it, to give more opportunities for people like Adam that I know like they exist, and we can see some really cool shit on those trails. And that became my focus, and still is my focus.
So you decided you were gonna you're gonna hit UTMB and you're gonna hit it hard. What was, and you just told me what your inspiration was it for, but how did you go about the training for it? Because you've already said you're pretty much in the flatlands.
Yeah,
How
so
did
we
you?
got some hills here.
Yeah,
I did a lot of. We got this thing called the woodlands. It's a lot of redwood trees in the forest, but there's something remarkable about the geology of it. It's not flat. It's like canyoned. So there's like this great big canyon where I live with redwood trees. I mean, it's pretty epic. It's like air conditioned.
yeah.
It's like another world. Like there could be dinosaurs roaming around back there is what it looks like. So I run that a lot. And then in July, me and my wife set up residence in Montana. My friend Chris Brown, who runs for Hoka, was traveling and doing some epic stuff in Europe, and his house was free. So we stayed there in Missoula, and I trained on some of the mountains there, up in Montana, and then basically went straight from Montana to France or to Switzerland, and then over to France, and then ran. So I did a little bit, but I learned a lot. Next year for UTMB 2023, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go to Europe right after Western States. So right after like June 25th, I'll be in that area in the Alps for 6 to 8 weeks, trying to hit the trail, MCC, like the actual trail, and really strategically break it down to where it's not this mystery of like, what's it going to be like? What do I expect? But we'll have a plan for every section of it, because I want to cross that finish line in Chamonix next year for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I know I've got a lot of friends that have raced the UTMB, the various distances, and they all go out for like a month or so, 6 weeks in
You got
advance
to.
to get the altitude training in, to adapt to the altitude as well, because altitude sickness hits them quite badly. A lot of the
Yeah.
runners out there, and if you're like, for instance, me, who doesn't live in mountainous areas,
Yeah.
you know, you're not used to it. It can hit you.
Totally. And the trails are just different there. The mountain trails are not the same as like the trails here in the US. I feel like we might utilize more switchbacks or like maybe less steep switchbacks, whereas there in the Alps, the mountain trails are just straight up.
Less chance of getting
So
eaten by bears as well, isn't there?
totally, and mountain lions and stuff like that. So that's cool. And the altitude really doesn't bother me. I think my body is really set up for altitude. It's the vertical and the different terrains on the trails. Like what
Yeah.
gave me a lot of problems at UTMB this year was it had rained several days in a row before, and my first section of MCC was this like matted down grass that had been trampled by 2,000 other runners because I was at the back of the pack. So it was super hard to navigate. I didn't have a lot of grip on my blade side, but with On, we're going to develop some other tech. I'm going to come back next year and not only have that as in my toolkit, but also I'll have experience on the trail. And I really, really like, I feel the competitiveness that was in me in my 20s come out. And I feel like I have more tools as a person and I feel more stable as a person to really explore that competitiveness. And I'm super stoked to
Yeah,
go all out for the
for
next
people who
year.
don't know what UTMB is, it's basically a massive trail running festival in Chamonix in France, which covers France, Italy, and Switzerland across the.
10,000 athletes.
Yeah, it's just mega, and there's different distances. Different. You got the MCC, TDS, the PTL. You've got the main event, the UTMB. Um, it's just mega, isn't it? What was the atmosphere like for you, being one of the few, obviously, para athletes there? Did you notice any
Yes.
others there, or
So
what?
far as we know, I was the only one. I mean, the only one publicly identified,
Yeah,
unless there was somebody else there that wasn't totally out in the open. And also UTMB doesn't have a system that tracks these athletes, so there's really truly no way to know. But I didn't see another runner like me there. There's a lot of people, a lot of hype in Chamonix. The atmosphere was like almost like a music festival, but for a bunch of these outdoor athletes. It was cool to be in the race. I like to describe the event as, for my race, lots of fans, lots of people lined up on the streets. Some of the course goes through people's backyards and up mountains, and there's like houses and villages. So those people all came out to cheer us on. I passed a school that had like maybe like second graders that had like 200 kids outside, and I high-fived them all down both sides, which was super awesome. But the race environment itself was not my favorite event I've ever done. The competitors didn't really like. I don't want to say that they like, didn't want me there, but I didn't have the camaraderie that I do in the U.S. at trail events. I usually leave a trail race in the U.S. with 50 new friends that I raced with. I didn't meet another person in my event in the race at all, and the race officials were really truly like wigged out that I was there. The sweepers were right up on me the whole way, radioing in who knows what because it was in French, and I was slipping around, and it was definitely challenging. It was just how I managed trail running. Shit happens, and I'm really good at falling down and getting back up and continuing. And I was really looking forward to getting to the top because the first section was the most vertical in the race, the hardest cutoff, the hardest everything. And once I got to the top, it was a descent down into this valley, some flat and a gradual up, which I really do well at, which is like my bread and butter. But they didn't know that, and they thought it was maybe a little too dangerous. Who knows? It's all speculation. I'm just going off of the vibes that were coming back and the facial expressions. And at first when I got to the top, my team was there, and they're like, Zach, we talked to to the station, to the checkpoint. They're going to let you continue. It's the next checkpoint that's going to be really strict, which was actually like 3 hours away and like under 10K, which I would have made it there. But then I got to the tent and the vibe changed, and they snapped my thing off, and I was done. And other runners at that type of checkpoint have been let through. It was just a lot of opinions and stuff that impacted my race.
Stigma.
And that's just, yeah, it's just a lack of education. I don't hold it anything personal with these people. They just don't know. And I think it starts at the top. UTMB needs to know about these athletes. They need to know a little bit, be more educated, so where they can share that stuff with the volunteers and maybe change some of the way things are done. Because I got removed from course at like 12:30 noon on a 40K. Like it wasn't like 10 o'clock at night on 100K and it's going to be dark and I had like 40 more miles left. I had like 20 miles left at noon, and the hardest part was behind me. Like, let me keep going. And I knew, I kind of had a vibe during the week that this was going to be the outcome. But again, that's why I'm there, is to make things better for the next time and the next
It must
time.
have been a little bit frustrating though.
It brought back feelings of back when I was a competitive wrestler and I'd get beat and I laid it all out there.
Yeah.
And you just felt that knot in your stomach of like, whoa, like there was nothing more you could do. It wasn't the outcome you wanted. It was just that feeling. And I got that feeling. And I feel like kind of more competitive out of it. Like I think this next year, I'm going to have that. I'm still wearing my MCC wristband. Yeah. I still look at it and I'm ready to come after it. And I think it's going to be fun to explore my alter ego, the Trailblazer. And I think next year's MCC for me is going to be a lot different. I'm excited. If anything, I left there feeling excited.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think much like the Paralympics when it first started and stuff, it's education and change at the top to obviously trickle down to the lower levels of understanding for the spectators, for the marshals and stuff like that. Getting maybe a category. I know some people don't like to be labeled or they don't like to be treated different, but that's why Paralympics have different categories.
Yeah.
So they could be treated fairly, you know what I mean?
Totally. So it's already there for them to utilize. They don't have to reinvent anything.
No.
They can just take something that already exists in endurance sports like paratriathlon and take the categories that are already established, plop it right on over to trail running, and boom, you didn't reinvent the wheel. You're going to now attract more athletes to your event.
Agreed.
And, the more people you get outside, the more people that care about the environment, which is something that we need as well. So there's a lot of things that can be positive by implementing that.
Definitely. And trail running, there's something special about being out in the nature, being surrounded by stuff that was created by whatever system was out there that decided, we're going to give these people that love to run outdoors this beautiful scenery, the fresh air, the sounds, the smells, and this is for them to explore. It should be there for everyone to explore, whether they're able or they've not got the facilities. We should be able to provide races for them to do it, and or
totally.
just accessibility, full stop.
Yeah, and not just at the UTMB
why should I
level.
enjoy it? Why should I get to enjoy it and not someone like yourself? Where's it's the outdoors, it's nature.
Totally. And I don't just advocate at the UTMB level. I also advocate at the grassroots level to get people who maybe have never imagined themselves in a trail race or on a trail. And I host this event called Born to Adapt. And its first event was this past April. And we got athletes out there that maybe wouldn't have been out there to begin with. And, just coming at it from both sides, elite level, grassroots level, just growing the sport.
Speaking of grassroots level, then are you actually seeing anything now within the schools and the colleges for para athletes to do cross country, as an example?
Yeah, it's not like a standard practice, but I think it's becoming more and more um, visible that you see these things. And I think as we continue as a society, it'll be like a staple in like all schools. Like all schools have math class or whatever. I think you'll start seeing like stuff like that for adaptive athletes just as a standard thing. At least that's my vision that I see. Then you'll see these athletes in universities competing in whatever it may be, cross country, track, just kind of give them an avenue to hone in on their sport, just like the Olympians you see today. They all went to college and had track teams, and there's athletes that you see, at least in the United States. There's a couple. I think you're going to start to see more.
That's great. So moving on, you've just come back from Ecuador. What were you doing there, and what was that? What was that like?
I climbed a 6,000-meter peak, a volcano called Cotopaxi, and it was probably one of my greatest and most challenging adventures of my life. Being up 6,000-meter plus. I mean, for people that don't know the translation, that's 19,347 feet. It is extremely high altitude mountaineering, and it was awesome. It was hardest thing I ever did. Most inspirational thing I've done. I did it with a group of other amputees. There was 7 below knees, 3 above knees, and we all made the summit for the first time in this group's history. They've been doing this climb for 8 years. It's a fundraiser for a nonprofit called Range of Motion Project. And we basically use this climb to show the world what it looks like when you have proper resources for prosthetics and what kind of mountains you can climb, because everybody has a mountain. Maybe it's not Cotopaxi, maybe it's interacting with their family or going to the mailbox or being involved in their community. They just don't have the resources for the prosthetics. This group has offices in Ecuador and Guatemala, and they help people that don't have the resources. So it was so cool to be a part of that. I climbed with a legend, Carl Egloff. He's one of the fastest speed mountaineers in the world. He's got FKTs on some of the 7 summits, broken Kilian Jornet's records on several of those, and he was right there climbing next to us. So it was awesome.
That's amazing. And obviously, you got a documentary coming out of your UTMB with On Running. That's right.
Yeah, it came out yesterday. So maybe I can give it to you. You can put it in the show notes, and they can check it out.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll stick that in there, and we'll share the love around on that. I've seen the trailer. It looks pretty say eye opening. Is probably the best way to describe it, because I say it's a little bit emotional as well. And I look forward. I love running documentaries anyway, but yours appears to be something a little bit special as well, which I'm looking forward to.
So I got to do a shout out. On, if you don't know, is a Swiss brand out of Zurich, and they have really invested in me and my vision, and basically let me use their platform to talk about the things that I've talked about today. And they gave me an opportunity to be a pro trail runner, which doesn't really exist for people like me. And they really are dedicated to expanding opportunities and get more people moving and caring about the planet.
That's amazing. I'm glad they've chosen someone like you to represent them out on the trails as well, which is pretty cool. So any other, apart from obviously UTMB next year, any other big plans?
Yeah, we're going to host our second Born to Adapt event in Los Olivos in April. And basically that is our grassroots event that invites adaptive and disabled athletes from all over to come and be a part of a trail community. So we're going to do the second edition of that. So I'm really stoked about that. And hopefully we'll get some more partners involved with that to make that event the best it can be and get the most amount of athletes there to really experience the trails. That's a really special event anyways, because it happens the same time during Born to Run, which is the community that got me into running and made me feel welcomed. So that's really cool. The book Born to Run 2 comes out by Christopher McDougall and Eric Gordon, and I'm one of the featured athletes in that new book. So that comes out in December, and Yeah, I got a full schedule of trail races next year. Tarawera is my next one, and UTMB in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Um, and we're just going to build up to my A race in Chamonix next year, UTMB MCC.
Any plans to return to the UK for a bit of running again?
I'm sure my wife's got friends there, and we'll definitely probably be back and do some more sites of the UK.
Excellent. Well, when you do decide to come over, give us a holler. We'll be able to show you around the delights of the Southwest Trails if you wanted. Um,
Totally.
um, we're going to move on now to the final quick fire questions. 10 questions. I'll ask you a question. You give me an
Yeah.
answer. Often deviate off the answers. So don't worry about it. Let's start with, do you have a favorite bit of kit that you like to take with you when you're out running?
Like, what do you mean? Like a favorite piece of gear?
Yeah, anything could be anything. It could be your buff. It could be your blade itself. It could be a pack or pair of pants.
Let's see here. That's a good question. I'm a sunglass guy,
Nice,
so I like to rock different sunglasses. Been rocking some Pit Vipers lately, so those are probably one of my favorites.
excellent. Do you have a favorite food you like to snack on while on the run?
Favorite food I like to snack on, huh? Um, that changes from time to time, but I will say after Cotopaxi, I had a Snickers bar,
Nice,
and it might have been the best tasting Snickers bar I ever had in my life. It was like the best. I was like, wow, I never knew these were so great. I was hungry. I was so hungry. So they had Snicker bars up there, and I
cool.
bought one.
All right, Marmite. Have you ever tried it? Yes or no?
What is it?
Marmite.
What is that?
Oh, so that'll be a no then. It's a yeast extract product which you put on toast and add to roast potatoes, and it's a very, you either love it or you hate it type
Yeah, I never
product.
heard of it. I'll ask my wife
Next time
about
you
it.
could,
Is it
yeah, you'll have to get your wife to ask her friends to send some over.
is it a like an English thing? Something
It's
that
yeah. So the Aussies have their version, which is called Vegemite, um, but ours is called
is it good
Marmite.
for you?
Say again?
Is it very good? Is it healthy?
Oh yeah, it's not. It's yeast
Okay.
extract. It's not a bad thing. It's yummy.
Marmite.
I love Marmite, but
Okay. I'll ask my
people
wife.
hate it. It's
Cool.
it's one of those things you got to try. Um, you'll have to get some sent out to you. If someone was to play you in a movie about your life, who would it be?
Who would it be? Christian Bale.
Your favorite place you've ever been to?
Huh. My favorite place. Um, it's a good question. I mean, I love where I live, so it's one of my all-time favorites because I go to really epic places, and I'm always really excited to come back to Albion, California, because it's just very quiet and serene and magical. Um, so I'm gonna have to say like probably Mendocino Coast.
Okay. Do you have a favorite meal?
My favorite meal, huh?
Basically, the one,
Um,
if you were to only have one meal for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Probably a nice salad with a ribeye steak and mashed potatoes and gravy with a
Nice.
kombucha.
And do you have a race that you would love to do if before you retire? Is there a race you would love to do?
What's interesting about that? I feel like with On, I have the ability to go to any race I want. I think I have a scenario. I would love to do UTMB and be competing against other adaptive athletes to where we can really race and not being like this one person show, but have maybe 10 other AKs in a race with me and we're just out there just like going after it. That's what I want to have happen somewhere. I mean, ideally UTMB, but that'd be sick.
What's next? Oh, if you were to have a song about your life, what song would it be?
If I don't have a song, um, huh, man, that's a good one. It'd have to probably be like some like Rolling Stone song about love and life or something.
Okay. Pineapple on a pizza, yes or no?
You know, I don't order it, but I eat it if it's there.
And do you have a sporting hero, someone that you've like loved watching back in the day or now?
Yeah, actually, do you know who Nimsdai Purja is?
No.
From Nepal. He's got the record for climbing the 8,000-meter peaks, the 14 peaks. It's on Netflix. You should watch
Oh, what's
his
his name again?
Nimsdai Purja.
Yes, yes, I do. I watched that documentary. I know you. Yeah, talking about now.
I
Former British
really,
Gurkha and
yeah,
SAS.
I think he is probably my favorite athlete
He's
on the
incredible,
planet.
isn't he?
Yeah, and just what he stands for, and like his background and his story, and lifting up the Nepalese climbers. I don't know. I just really, honestly, I have a desire to climb a 6,000-meter plus peak with him, maybe one day.
Just send him an email. I reckon he
I
probably
think I
say yeah.
might.
Just do it.
I don't know if it's going to be Everest, because Everest is kind of like the like amusement park of mountains. But I've been looking up some other mountains in Nepal region that are in that same region. One of them is called Island Peak, and that is like it's like 20,000 something. It's pretty technical. It'd be cool to have him guide me up there.
Do it, mate. Just send him an email. What have you got to lose? That's what I say. So moving on to our final bits then. So do you have any advice for anyone listening or watching that may be limbless, has not tried running or trail running, how they get into it, and just
Yeah,
general advice for them?
I think my advice is that running is for everybody, and don't compare yourself to somebody who's been doing it for a long time. And I always remind people that like my first 5K took me almost an hour, which isn't great. But just be out there with the running community. The running community is really awesome. It's great to have a community around you, and you don't have to have race ambitions to be a runner. You can just want to meet with your Wednesday run group, and you're a runner. So I always tell people that you don't have to do a half marathon or a 10K. Just go hang out with your local run group and be around that community.
That's good. And any advice for any other runners, beginners, for example, that looking out want to stop running?
Yeah, just write down your goals and your dreams and on a vision board, and keep looking at it every day. And that's probably like the greatest piece of advice that has worked for me. Writing these things down, not just having the goals in your brain, but like writing them down somewhere, that someplace that you can see every day. My vision board's sitting over here. It's kind of behind some clothes, but all the stuff that's happening to me over the last few years are on that board. It's
That's
wild.
that's really great. And finally, if anyone wants to follow you, find you, and just generally hook up, see what you're up to and stuff, where can they find you?
I think Instagram is a good platform. So they can find me at Zachary_movement. And that's just ZACHARY_movement. Or if you're a TikToker, you can find me at Trailblader. And that's another platform that I really rock out. But if you want to contact me personally, Instagram's the way.
That's brilliant. I'll put them their links down in the description.
Well, I guess you
Anyway.
found me on TikTok. So, I mean, hey, either
We
one.
found each other on there, and I've been following you ever since. It's been great. I enjoy your stuff. We'll have a finishing conversation off after this, but for the podcast, Zach, I've been absolutely brilliant listening to your story, and like I said to you before we start recording, pretty much every ultra runner and stuff has a story to tell. And yours is definitely one worth listening to. Thank you very much for giving up your
Yeah,
time.
man, my pleasure. Thanks for having me here.
And from the podcast, thank you very much, and good luck in UTMB next year.
Thank you.
What a great chat that was, and that was quite. I found it really interesting to hear his story and the way certain aspects of my sport hasn't moved forward enough yet in regards to para athletes like Zach in some of the biggest races in our discipline of sport. I find it a little bit of a shame to hear that they're not really that supported enough yet. It's 2022 now. We should, and the companies like UTMB, stuff like that, should really start, thinking a bit more about how they look after their athletes, able-bodied and para. But anyway, I really enjoyed chatting with Zach, and it's really nice to get to know him more. I loved recording that episode. And if you'd like to too, please like, share, subscribe, all that sort of stuff. And let's get talking a bit more about para athletes in the trail running world as well. Let's do this. If you'd like to go follow me. I've put the links in the description, and also check out the documentary that's come out. Check it out. So yeah, brilliant. Till next time, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I'm the ultra running Matt Lowe, and you've been listening or watching If My Feet Could Talk. Until next time.